Thank you, Keith, for sharing the beauty of the birds in this important bird area, and gratitudes to the Tucson Audubon for the opportunity to share information about the biologically diverse ecosystem of the Patagonia Mountains, where the threat of 21st century industrialized mining looms large. It is a classic David versus Goliath story with a system of rules and regulations that allow the corporate profit story to be more important than protecting the water and all life forms. There is archaeological evidence of more than 10,000 years of human occupation in the Patagonia Mountains, with the Sobapari O'odham tribe and the Hohokam tribe being the documented indigenous peoples. Ancient stone tools have been found at mine sites, and turquoise from these mountains were used in ceremony and for trade. When the Europeans occupied these lands, they began to mine minerals on or close to the surface. This mining is what we call today artisanal mining, very small operations with low impact on the land, the water, and the air. Then in the late 1800s, mining moved to an early corporate model, which was encouraged by the 1872 mining law signed by President Ulysses S. Grant to settle the West. Bulletin, we've got a lot of people. Sadly, this almost 150-year-old law still governs hard rock mining on federal public lands. The next evolution of the mining industry lasted through the 1960s, when the technology available to go deeper for minerals wasn't yet invented, making the operations cost prohibitive. The classic mining story of that era is the company would go bankrupt, leaving environmental disasters for the taxpayers to clean up. Next slide, please. The 21st century business model of industrialized mining is significantly different. During 100 years of mining in the Patagonia Mountains, a total of 250,000 tons of ore was removed. 100 years, 250,000 tons. A former owner of the mining proposals in the Patagonia Mountains stated it planned to remove that 100-year total every 25 days. The current federal administration is weakening environmental regulations. The mining industry identifies the state of Arizona as the 9th friendliest mining jurisdiction in the world. Next slide, please. Beginning in 2006, several foreign mining companies began to develop large-scale mine proposals in our bioregion. There is no modern mining that will meet the standards of responsible mining to sufficiently protect the health and vitality of our ecosystem. The active mining companies in this area, immediately outside the town of Patagonia, are outlined in that red area there. And there are 2 mining companies there. The darker gray areas, the 3 parcels, are owned by Barksdale Resources, a junior Canadian mining company. And I say owned, I mean they have the claims there. Those are forest public lands. Then the green area and the yellow areas are claims controlled by South 32, an Australian mining company. The total of all the acreage inside that red area is just over 39,000 acres. And while we're looking at this map, I also want to point out the yellow areas in the middle. Those are private patented lands, which is a unique thing under the 1872 mining law. You used to be able to go out and work a mine claim for a little while and then say to the federal government, gee, this is great, I'd like to own it. And the federal government would sell it to you for $5 an acre. The patented is still on the books, but has been on hold for about a dozen years now. And the green area up top there with that circle is the Harshaw Creek area where we saw all those birds. And they're right there at the location of concern. Since 2011, PARA has monitored the activities of mining companies in order to ensure the actions of these companies and of government agencies have sustainable, long-term benefits for our public lands, our water, our wildlife, and the ecosystem in which we all live. PARA successfully defeated an open pit mine proposal, halted exploratory drilling on Forest Service public lands, and influenced the state requirement for the remediation project from a $3 million passive water treatment plant to a $25 million active water treatment plant. The other two active mining companies in the area are Hudbay, which hopes to operate the Rosemont project, and also Rio Tinto, which has been filing a lot of claims but has not announced any intentions. Next slide, please. The big elephant in the room at the moment and the most advanced proposals are South 32's Hermosa project. And where you see all the activity on this picture is the patented private lands. They can do a lot of work on these private lands and escape most environmental regulations. In August of 2018, South 32 acquired the Hermosa project from a junior Canadian mining company. The companies have been very careful to stay within the boundaries of that private land. The previous owner of this project had forecast daily production of 10,000 tons of ore, consumption of 650 gallons of water per minute on a 24/7 work schedule, and daily traffic of over 600 vehicles. South 32's pre-feasibility study will provide information on how it intends to move forward with an operating mine. The company has delayed the report from its original release date last April. Then it was going to be September, and it just announced that another delay of the report, and it will be due sometime in the last quarter of 2020. Next slide, please. There are hundreds of abandoned mine sites in the Patagonia Mountains, and many leak acid mine drainage. The Coronado National Forest Service does not have sufficient resources to remediate all the old sites. PARA is currently monitoring and reporting to the Forest Service a leak at the former World's Fair mine on Flux Canyon Road. The picture you're looking at is not the World's Fair mine. This is an older mine leak from about 3 years ago that the Forest Service has now remediated. The minerals that South 32 wants to mine are deep, about 1,500 feet below ground. The water level is at 100 feet. So the company just announced that it intends to run a massive dewatering program in order to construct decline shafts to the minerals. It is projected that they will draw down 1.6 billion, with a B, 1.6 billion gallons of water per year for a 4-year dewatering project. This will reconfigure the watershed. The company is submitting permits to state agencies, and PARA will file objections to the plan when the state announces a comment period. Next slide, please. This region is part of a wildlife corridor identified as one of the top 10 areas in the world most in need of protection for species survival. The proposed reconfiguration of the watershed does not bode well for the health of the mountain or the watershed. Mining operations are exempt from state dark sky laws because it would be an economic hardship for the company. But the wildlife suffers from this level of round-the-clock industrialized mining. PARA has been monitoring the endangered Mexican spotted owl, which roosts in the Patagonia Mountains. The adults return to this area, but no fledglings have been spotted for several years now, since modern mining activities started. Next slide, please. It is no wonder that the Mexican spotted owls have stopped breeding in this location. Next slide, please. PARA recognizes that the health and prosperity of this region are tied to the well-being of the Patagonia Mountains and the Harshaw-Sonoyta Creek watershed, which are the source of our drinking water, clean air, biodiversity, and overall wealth of natural resources. Their continued protection helps drive this region's economy. We humans are at a choice point for survival. Planet Earth's ecosystem is spinning out of balance because humans are continuing to act out an economic story that no longer serves the greater good. Continuing on that path is the willful destruction of the natural environment. Many organizations are working to protect the water and the wildlife and to co-create the new story of thriving and resilient communities living in balance with all life forms. Thank you for your attention and for being a part of the solution.
All right, thank you so much to Keith and Carolyn. That was a ton of information, so I'm sure we have lots of questions. I just wanted to mention a couple last things. So, you know, we just heard a lot of important information from Carolyn, and I think it's important for all of us to translate into, you know, what can we do to, you know, help preserve this area, especially because we all very much care about birds on this presentation. And a lot of us are regularly visiting this area, be it to go to the Patton Center or bird the surrounding areas. So in the town of Patagonia especially, there are many environmental nonprofits, including Tucson Audubon, the Nature Conservancy, Borderlands Restoration, and others that are all trying to work together to put together a conservation plan for this area. It's also important for every birder, environment, nature appreciator who, you know, regularly visits this area and does contribute to something that we call the nature-based economy, to make sure that their voices are heard as well. Now, special caveat for these times, as we are in the middle of a COVID crisis, we are not actively encouraging anyone to make that voice known particularly loud in town right now. We're trying to be responsible, but come the time when we can travel safely again, you know, just noting that when you're in town, you know, making it known why you're there, mentioning it to your friends, stopping into town, having a slice of pie, making it very clear that birders and nature appreciators have a role to play in the future of Patagonia. And so when it comes time to, you know, submit comments to the state on mining proposals or other kinds of actions like that, we're ready to go, and we know that our voice is strong and unified, and we're ready to take action on the behalf of birds and wildlife for that area. So I will stop talking, and I would love to hear any questions that we have and open it up for discussion at this point.
One of the questions that came up a few times, and I think it was answered in the chat, but it would be good to have clarification. What are the minerals that they're mining for in the Patagonia Mountains?
The primary ones that they are looking for are manganese, silver, and lead. And also there is some copper that Barksdale is looking at, which is right next to the South 32 project. So those are the primary minerals.
And then one of the other questions was, where did they get all the water? And I think Valerie mentioned that they get it from the groundwater. Is that true? And yeah, where would they get all the water that they need to do the mining?
The intention is to pump groundwater. And unfortunately, when the state grants permission to pump all this groundwater, the state of Arizona does not take cumulative impacts, including drought and climate crisis, into consideration.
Yeah, that's
I think
also another byproduct of really old, outdated mining laws, and something that we continue to monitor and explore options for future action against that as well.
I think that goes along with a question that Scott had of, does the state of Arizona regulate mining on private land?
There really are no regulations of mining on private lands. In fact, the county has a specific state statute that does not allow it to make any laws with respect to mining operations on more than 5 acres. And so it's, as you know, the mining industry identifies it as the 9th friendliest mining jurisdiction in the world because there are no regulations that have any meaning. That it's a bend over backwards, help the mining company be as profitable as possible.
Teacher was wondering, what other environmental groups are working with or helping PARA?
Well, we're fortunate in this community to have a lot of organizations that are each doing proactive things. PARA is the organization that is the watchdog on the ground here locally to see what is happening with mining companies. We work with many of our local partners, such as Tucson Audubon, Nature Conservancy, Borderlands, and other organizations. PARA also works with primarily 2 national organizations, one being Earthworks, particularly with respect to water issues, and also with Defenders of Wildlife with respect to wildlife issues. As I said, we're the eyes on the ground, and as watchdogs, we bark loudly when something is going on, and the big dogs at those 2 organizations are great resources for advice and also for legal help.
There's a lot of different questions coming in. I'm trying to parse through all of them. One question I thought was good. Generally, how do locals view the mining?
Well, it has changed over the course of time, and it depends upon the pressure being brought by whatever mining company is in the area. Back in 2006 until 2018, so for 12 years, there was a junior Canadian mining company in here under several names, most recently Arizona Mining. That company, by the way, for those of you in Tucson familiar with the Rosemont project, the operations down in Patagonia were started by the same person who was Augusta Resources and sold off to Hudbay. That's Richard Wark. When Richard Wark was in final negotiations to sell off the Rosemont project to Hudbay, he sent his people down here and began filing claims in the Patagonia Mountains. So for about a dozen years, this was a junior Canadian mining company. They don't ever mine a project. They develop projects to sell off to as seniors. Their tactics are different from the seniors, and those tactics ended up creating divisiveness in the community. I always felt that the best gauge of where the community stands was our town election 2 years ago, when the mayor position was up for election, and the one candidate was for protecting the water and the wildlife. Never took a position of pro or anti-mining, but spoke as essentially a 7th-generation thinker who wants to protect the water and the wildlife. The other candidate was go mining, let's have at it, because it's the greatest thing since sliced bread for our community. The Let's Protect the Environment candidate won by a 2-to-1 margin in the largest turnout this community has ever had. I think that's the best indication of where the community is. Since the sale to the senior mining company, South 32, that background stirring up people has changed significantly. And also, as more people are aware of the risks and the realities of mining, more and more people are going, this isn't really going to be such a good thing.
Wow. Let's see. Nicole, are you looking at the chat too?
Yeah, I am. We didn't miss any from much earlier, did we? I want to make sure we don't leave people behind. Okay.
No.
Okay, I'll scroll all the way to the bottom then.
You might have a better idea of which questions to go with. You have a much better understanding than I do of the
Okay,
situation.
let's read through these. And if Carolyn's okay with it, we can also share all of our contact information, and you're welcome to email us later if you think of other questions as well. A couple things about figuring out, what state legislatures and decision makers we can target. There are regular environmental report cards that get put out. I don't know of one, maybe you do, Carolyn, that specifically looks at mining as like a political indicator. I've generally seen it as a more general category, but something we should look into. Questions in here?
Yeah, I think that's what you're saying is correct, Nicole. There really isn't an overall, especially specific to the state of Arizona. In our county here in Santa Cruz County, we do send questions to all the candidates for their responses, and then we share that via our newsletter. But that's not, it statewide only as it affects Santa Cruz County at this point.
Yeah, so we're having a couple questions about water quality, and I wonder if, Carolyn, you want to talk a little bit about the concerns we have both about water quality and water quantity, and why we're monitoring both of those.
Well, yeah, they are both obviously very important. This groundwater dewatering that they want to do, drawing out 1.6 billion gallons of water a year for 4 years, and then unknown yet what they would draw down after that if they get approvals to move into production, is of major concern. PARA is a part of the town's flood and flow committee, which is in the process of sending a letter to the Forest Service asking for comprehensive surface and groundwater study of this entire region, that our preference is it be conducted by USGS and paid for by the mining company, and that no additional activities be allowed until that study is complete. Nicole mentioned the conservation plan, which has been crafted by the Nature Conservancy in partnership with Tucson Audubon and Borderlands Restoration and Circle Z. As I said at the beginning, given the chaos of the times, there's no other place. And we have an incredible number of people here who are proactively working to protect the water quantity and quality.
All right, I know we're coming up on our hour here, Luke. Do you want to see if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask a question? And maybe if people still have their questions, I'd welcome you guys to email us for sure.
We go like another 5 minutes. Anyone have any questions that you'd like to raise your hand for? And so to raise your hand, right next to the chat button, there's a little participant icon. You can click on that. We'll bring up everyone in the call with us, and then underneath it, it'll say invite or unmute me or raise hand, and you can just click raise hand.
All right, so Nancy has a question. So Nancy, I'm gonna unmute you and you can ask your question.
Well, when we hiked and birded in Hersau Creek, there was a lot of private property, and is that on Forest Service land, or aren't they upset about the mining? I don't get it.
So are you talking about the Forest Service or maybe people's properties along the road?
People's properties along the road.
Yes, Keith or Carolyn, you want to talk about residents along Harshaw Road?
Well, my experience with the residents along, well, there's Harshaw Creek Road and Harshaw Road. So
Yeah.
Harshaw Creek Road, which we traveled today looking at the birds, the private property owners that are along there are generally not at all pleased with the proposed mining activity, especially at one point when the mining company and the county were going to turn that into a 4-lane highway while they fixed a bridge. And get out there and drive Harshaw Creek Road, and you know that wouldn't work. And a large number of people showed up at the council meeting where that was being discussed, and it went away. So stand up, speak out. It really does make a difference.
All right, a lot more questions on here. So
Yeah, let's take 2 more questions. How's that?
yeah, that sounds good.
Let's go with Ruth.
Yep.
Well,
Sorry, I'm wondering if the mining companies will play the jobs card. Have they talked about how many jobs will be generated by the mines, and especially in this climate of pandemic?
Oh, that's absolutely always what they talk about, and that is what their advertising is all about, is jobs and economy. And you know, one of the things that we are looking forward to is sharing all the economic information about nature-based economy as the healthier model for us. And you know, if you have, you know, please check out our website, sign up for the newsletter. There would be constant updates on what is going on out here.
Okay.
All right, thanks everyone. And it looks like we've highlighted important. Last question is, how can everyone help now? And the biggest thing I would say coming up is our national election. Now, we of course don't endorse candidates, but there will be a lot of excellent report cards coming out now that our primaries are over. The Tucson paper puts out great informational report cards, as well as interviews with candidates, and I'm sure there'll be several rounds of spirited debates. So we'll be doing more action alerts as we get closer to the election. But I think we had about a 30% turnout for the primaries. So let's keep that energy going all the way through the national elections. And of course, even if you're not in Tucson, still important to vote. So thanks so much, everyone.